o'clock, so we'll get started. I hope everyone's having a great week. Sounds like it's been busy. My 804 class, like I was saying, it's been Monday all week, so I don't know if you feel that way or not, but um, if you guys would, you don't mind, make sure you put your name in the chat box, and that way I can give you your points there after we get out of class for participation. So we are actually in week 6. If you looked at your syllabus and been tracking that, so it's been a quick, fast class. I kind of shared that with you the first night. Hey, we're no more and going to get started, and before you know it, class is going to be over with. So here we are, week 6. So about 3 things I'd like to do this evening during Zoom is I want to go over actually week 7 slide deck. So if you look at week 6 as 2 separate slide decks. A lot of the information I'd already covered it in previous weeks, so I didn't want to waste time tonight kind of going over that same information again. I wanted to cover some information in the week 7 slide deck. After we do that, I want to go over and just kind of review the CBM assignment, just some of the things that we're going to be looking for, so you guys have an understanding of that. We'll look at the syllabus, review it, and then I'm going to pop up, show you the CBM sample report to kind of show you what some of the new sections will look like in there. That I mentioned last week, you'll have a couple new sections in that CBM assessment report that we maybe haven't had in the informal or norm reference. So those will be the 3 things that we'll kind of focus on this evening. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share and get going here. First thing you'll see pop up will be the week 7 slide deck. I'm going to kind of go over it quickly. This is a shorter slide deck. So this is focusing on interpretation of assessment results, just some key terms and some terminology to get you familiar with and some things that we look at. So Rebecca, can you guys see my screen okay? I just want to make sure. Okay. So a little bit about test results, how we use those to determine eligibility, maybe how we go in and interpret some of that information. So it's more on like norm reference assessments, but and then some different strategies that we use. So basically, eligibility for special services is basically determined by using a set of criteria, and a lot of that comes from observations, data we've collected, and then we go into the assessment process to kind of try to finalize that data gathering process to determine whether they're going to be eligible for services or eligibility decisions. Sometimes the criteria may vary from state to state. Let me give you an example of this. A lot of states have changed from or gotten away from a discrepancy model. And what I mean by that is they look for a distinct discrepancy in test scores to determine eligibility. Well, a lot of states have gotten away from discrepancy model, where now it requires you to do a lot more on the front end with intervention services before you even would get to the testing part. So it's just requiring a lot more. A lot of states have done that. Oklahoma is actually one that they have not yet, but we will be shifting over to that in about another 3 years. So basically, when they made that announcement, we all had like a 5 to 6 year window to kind of start changing how we go about the data gathering process versus just giving us 1 year and we had to rush through it. So we've been given a window of time to prepare, but a lot of states are already there. They've gotten away from it. So it does vary from state to state. Also, state criteria may not exclude students who would qualify for services under ADA. So it's not that they're going in and coming up with some guidelines that's going to prevent a student from getting in. It's just it's trying to prevent students from being misidentified is what it's trying to do. And so getting away from that discrepancy model takes a lot of that out of the equation. Another thing they talk about here when we look at determining test results is taking a holistic view. You know, I mentioned early on in this class, don't rely on one assessment to determine whether a student's going to be placed in special education services. Okay, we need to look at kind of the whole picture. This slide talks about looking at the holistic view. Okay, so by looking at the child, are they dependent on the environment that they come from to fulfill their basic physiological and psychological needs? Looking at the child's family, is it the most active part of his or her environment? Are they child an active participant in his or her environment? Also, is their functioning um, multiplying transactionally determined? Okay, so we're looking at the home environment and taking things into consideration there. Does a child adapt to his or her environment regardless of the health of the environment they're in, of their home? So we know children come from all types of backgrounds. The higher the poverty rate, the less resources that they have in the home. Okay, we know that research has shown us. So also looking at the home environment, is it a toxic home environment? Are there factors there that impedes their health? For instance, heavy smoking in the home, heavy alcohol use, drug use. Okay, that affects their overall health, whether it's psychologically or physically. Okay. Child's motivations for his or her behavior. Okay. Do they see a lot of violence in the home? That affects their behavior, the behavior that's displayed at school. So a child's attachment, separations, and losses are a very significant factor in his or her psychological development. Okay, are they having a lot of separation amongst their family? Is it a transient family? Do you see mom and dad being in and out of jail? Could be a revolving door. Those things factor in on the child's psychological development. Also, their current functioning must be evaluated in light of their past functioning in the academic environment. We need to also look at their behavior and understand that in relation to their past context and their different influences they've had. Additional things to look at from the holistic side of it is looking at the child develops conflicts, tensions, and problems that are inevitable and necessary. Okay. We need to consider behavioral issues. Looking at the child's thoughts, behaviors, or feelings. Do they appear to be atypical? Is it important to consider where and what circumstances or patterns and behaviors of emotional expression? Do we see emotional issues? And then the last thing on holistic is looking at the child and his or her significant environment, comparing the school and the home. We need to assess those. Those holistic factors, guys, we get that information from those adaptive behaviors. There are a series of questions, one that's addressed by a teacher from the school, the other from the home. So I don't know if you guys have ever had to complete any of the adaptive behavior skills for students, but it's going to ask you a lot of detailed questions about how that student functions and performs in certain environments and situations. So those points I went over, we get those answers from the adaptive behavior skills. Okay. Some are more extensive than others. Here are the suggested procedures to go through. We want to obviously first get permission. We can't just all of a sudden assume we're going to test the kid without the parent knowing. Right? I've mentioned that before earlier in the class. We need to screen for any type of sensory impairment or physical problems to determine if that is contributing to their struggles academically. Interview with the parent, going over some things with them. We want to obviously do the assessment, the intellectual and academic. Okay. So you guys, the norm reference assessments fall into that category. Sometimes we have to do a behavioral assessment if we're seeing some behavior outburst. We may want to go in and do some type of behavioral observations, checklists, some type of informal assessment. And then we interpret the test results. That's often done by someone, a qualified professional that comes in and they interpret those results to you in the meeting. At the end of that meeting, they make recommendations on whether the child should be considered for services. Okay. So in the interpretation, we need to rule out any sensory acuity problems or anything going on medically. We need to rule that out. We need to determine whether any home conflicts are present or enlist the services of a school psychologist or counselor if there are conflicts going on or issues in the home. And we also need to look at previous educational experiences and how those experiences might have influenced students' achievement. Okay. Again, here we're talking about continuing the procedures, looking at school problems, the school environment, could be a particular teacher, subject area that's a trigger for the student. We also want to go in and compare their intellectual, academic, and behavior measures. Going back to what I mentioned a while ago, I mentioned Oklahoma uses a discrepancy model. So we're looking for discrepancies now. Here, we're still able to do it in their intellectual performance, in their academic, and we're comparing those and we're looking to see if we have major discrepancies between those two types of assessments, and comparing the skill sets that we tested. And so we also look at adaptive behavior measures or adaptive behavior scales, getting that information from the background, the holistic information that I mentioned. That's where that comes from. We're going to try to determine whether there are emotional behavior problems that may exist. Okay. Has anybody ever had to sit down and go through a MEGS meeting or a meeting where you're trying to determine if a child would qualify for a category of emotionally disturbed? Has anybody had to sit down and have that discussion with your team? No? I'm seeing Rebecca shake her head. I don't know if you've looked at the 5 criteria for emotional disturbance. If you have not, I challenge you to look at it. There are 5 basic criteria that we look at when considering the category of ED or emotional disturbance. They're very broad. They're very vague. Okay. If you look at any of those 5, I can pretty much assure you that myself or you on Zoom tonight have experienced any 2 of those in the last 3 to 4 days. That's how vague they are. Okay. So we need to be very aware of that, especially when you're considering that category of emotional disturbance. Okay, that is a label that goes with that student for a long period of time. But again, the category under IDA that you have to go by is very vague. So challenge you sometime after class tonight or this week to look at that, and see what kind of the criteria is for that. We also want to consider whether they have speech or language problems. Okay, if they've had speech and language issues, it's going to affect their phonetic skills, their pronunciations, learning letter sounds, letter identifications, which oftentimes leads to lower scores in the areas of reading that we test for. So I have to take that in consideration when I go in and interpret those results. We have to also look at language factors. Basically, are they ESL, English as a second language? So if they're migrants coming in and they don't understand the language, obviously their academic achievement's going to be impacted by that. So we have to be really careful not to just automatically assume because they are struggling learners and their English is not proficient that they're automatically special ed, and oftentimes they're misidentified. Okay, that's why it's important to you have interpreters, and understand the cultural differences when we look at that. Okay. So when we interpret those results after we've done informals, formal assessments, we go in and interpret, especially on the formal. Okay. Here are some terms you probably really won't get into a lot of them, knowing the specific term, but you'll know what they mean. So inter-individual interpretation. That's a mouthful. That's a lengthy term, right? Basically, in a nutshell, is what we did last week on norm reference. You're comparing the student to a peer normed group. Okay. This is basically a fancy term right here for what we did when we were learning and talking about norm reference. They're compared to a norm group, similar age, background, and hundreds, if not thousands, in that group that they're compared against. Okay. Intra-individual interpretation, you're comparing the student to his or her own performance. You guys heard me mention criterion reference test. That student is compared to his or her own performance, not a big, large group of people across the country, but against themselves. And so inter-individual is basically norm reference. It's normed, a normed group. Intra-individual, themselves, against themselves, okay? IQ and adaptive behavior when we interpret. All right. These are typically IQ tests administered by a school psychologist, psychometrist, someone that's a qualified evaluator. Okay. It pinpoints your strengths. The interpretations of cognitive measures determine or refer to patterns of functioning. Okay. We also use what we call cross battery assessment. I may come in and use the WISC assessment for the IQ portion and then pull another section from the WJ4, and that's more or less what we consider cross battery. We're using more than one assessment to come up with our overall scores, and that's not uncommon to do. Okay. When we look at educational achievement, educator is going to be responsible for administering norm reference tests, educational professionals, psychologists, psychometrists, and basically to ensure accuracy of the administration. We want to make sure that we're following the protocols and we're getting an accurate administration of that test. We don't want those results to be, excuse me, skewed. Inter-individual, again, the normed group, it compares the student scores with age and grade expectations. So on the comprehensive report that I shared with you and showed you how those are reported, the categories, you remember the age equivalency section or grade equivalency, that's what they're talking about right here. So Rebecca, Johnny Joe might have been seventh grade, second month when I tested him, but on a subtest, he scored third grade, fourth month, or his age equivalency was 7 years, 2 months. Either one of those interpretations tells us it's significantly below where the student should be based on where they're at right now as far as being placed in a grade. Okay. Intra-individual, specific strengths in individuals. It's looking at that individual and comparing against themselves. All right. Next thing we do, write up test results, which you guys have been experiencing with the informal and the norm reference. Okay, we have the specific sections that we go in and report. Usually the first half is a narrative, second half is statistical. We organize those by the different domains rather than by the test. Okay, so in the report, and how you see it listed does not mean that's the order I gave them. It's putting everything in functional domains. Okay, is how that's reported. It identifies strengths and weaknesses or deficits, and also identifies some of the behaviors that were displayed during the test. Also, may emphasize variables in their learning strategies, things that I observed, highlights, developmental ceilings. You guys remember that term, basal and ceiling? Ceiling is where I capped the test off. I had to stop it. They hit so many incorrect in a row. Each subtest is different. Some subtests have a ceiling of 5, some have a ceiling of 6, some may have a ceiling of 3. Okay, so we always identify that, and it gives their instructional needs and any type of curriculum modifications. And it also will give suggestions regarding behavioral or instructional management. Here's the format. Okay, you guys have already seen this. You've been following it basically in your reports. We have identifying information, background, referral information, classroom observation, and parent information. That's one of the first sections you guys write up in your reports that you've done. Test results, test interpretations, summary and conclusion. It's a basic format. Okay, you guys have already gotten some practice with that. You'll get to do it one more time coming up for the CBM. And then writing educational objectives. That would be your next step, is starting to write objectives and start building the IEP if the student qualifies. So you want to look at short-term objectives, some different benchmarks, and some long-term goals. You'll get to do this in the mock IEP for your final. Okay? Coming up with some short-term goals and some long-term based on the data you've collected. Reevals. Okay? Data should be collected in the areas that the team members believe need additional information to continue eligibility and interventions. These are come up every 3 years. Must consist of only the additional assessment determined to be needed in order to review the case. Okay, sometimes you get in there and maybe the team decides they don't want to do the reeval. It's not uncommon. Okay, a lot of times it is to determine, assess where the students at, see if they made any significant gains, improvements in areas that they were weak in. Okay. This is kind of a little overview I wanted to share with you. Again, week 6 slide decks, I'd already kind of covered the information, but I just kind of wanted to share the results and interpretation section and kind of go over the report. Again, you've had experience and practice at doing those reports, kind of the scaled down mini versions of it. I'm going to do a stop share on that. I'm going to go back quickly and get in there. I'm going to exit out. Bear with me just a minute. I'm going to pull the syllabus up quickly. But don't make you too dizzy scrolling down quickly. Okay. Can, Rebecca, can you see my screen share on that syllabus? Okay. Sometimes when I switch documents, it won't show it. Second thing I wanted to do tonight was go over just kind of the breakdown in the 2 new sections that we're going to look at, okay, on this. So you have your identifying information. You've already accustomed to doing that in your report. Basic stuff, name of test, dates it was administered, skills, explanation about the student, okay, the pseudonym, disability, grade level, and any background information, teacher observation, family information. The first new section of the 2 that we're going to add is the probe and intervention section. Probe is simply a different name for an assessment. It's a short, quick assessment, somewhat similar to an informal. But it's something that you're going to administer multiple times. If you remember, I talked about for this CBM assessment, we want you to get 4 to 6 data points. So that means you administer the probe 4 to 6 different times and record their scores. And then we'll put those scores, data points, and start charting and graphing those. Okay, in this section, we're asking you to name and describe the probe. Okay, give a little explanation on it. Is it reading fluency, reading comprehension? Okay, I'm going to give you an example where to find some good probes here in just a minute. But you're going to name and describe the probe, talk a little bit about the rationale for using it, why you selected it. You're going to talk about or describe the quantity and frequency of the probe use. It was given 6 times over a 10-day period. Okay, something as simple as that. Then you're going to talk about an intervention that was used. So if you give that probe and you're seeing that score go down each time, that tells us, hey, we need to figure out some type of intervention because the scores they're declining and not increasing. So you would name and describe an intervention that you would suggest using, and then talk about the rationale for the intervention, why you selected it. Okay. Hopefully we see the scores go up, not down. That's the goal. Then you would explain any modification to the intervention. If none, if you didn't have to implement an intervention or a modification, you just simply explain. No intervention or modification was needed due to student scores increasing each probe administration. That's all you would have to say. Okay. We hope that your student, their scores show an upward trajectory, meaning their scores improve each time. But I will show you the intervention, the modification, how we're going to plot that if you have to do it. Okay. First new section again, probe and intervention. Then we're going to get down to another familiar section, your test results. You're going to show your raw data in tables, charts, or graphs. You've already been doing that. This is a new item. This is a new type of visual we're going to put in. We're going to put in, I wanted to highlight it here so you'd see. It's going to highlight everything down below, so I'll wait. We're going to present data in a line graph, and we're going to show a baseline, basically where the student's starting off. That's going to be their first score, kind of their base. An intervention line and a name line. So there's three terms that we're going to focus on in this graph: a baseline, an intervention line, and a name line. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment on an actual graph, okay? That is something that's new in addition to showing your raw data up here. Okay, so you know you're at least going to have one graph here showing your raw data, and then another graph or visual down here showing the three new items: the baseline, intervention line, and the name line. The rest of the information on your test results and interpretation sections pretty much basically going to be the same. You're going to give like an analysis of your results, kind of explain those, a little bit about the student performance. Support all conclusions with data from your CBM. So as you conclude, just kind of reference the data to support kind of your conclusion and what you are going to be recommended. You want to make sure in this section that you highlight strengths based on data from the CBM, not data from the norm reference or the informal, but data that you're seeing from the CBM probe that you're administering, and then also highlight what you felt like were some weaknesses based on data from the CBM. Okay. Again, you're just identifying some strengths and then some areas that you feel like the student needs to improve on. Next section, again, you're familiar with it, recommendation and conclusions. So you're going to highlight some instructional planning recommendations based on everything that you saw in the data. These recommendations could be methods that you're going to use in a classroom, or any modifications such as modifying the grade level content, and then just give a little short, brief summary of their overall performance, how they performed overall on the CBM probe. Okay, here's the second new section. The first one was probe and intervention. The second new section that we're going to put into our report is a reflection paragraph. Here's what we're asking you to put in there. We're asking you to identify what you feel like are three things that you learned about administering and using a CBM probe through this administration of them. Three things. That's open-ended, guys. There's no right or wrong answer on that. Just three things that you learn from utilizing it, okay? The only way you can mess that up is simply not writing anything about it. The next thing is discuss if you would use CBM assessments or probes again and why. Support your stance with at least two pieces of data. Okay, again, that's open-ended. That is a personal reflection. If you wouldn't use it, just simply tell why. If you would, explain why. So if you wouldn't, that's fine. Just kind of explain why you wouldn't do it. Okay, either or. You can put either one down. The last thing we're asking you to reflect on is at least, or outline or provide what you feel like are at least two strengths and two weaknesses of using CBM probes based on your experience. So if you look at this section right here, this is all just your personal feelings, whether you would use it again or you would not, and just explain why, and three things you learned about using CBMs, and then what you think are two strengths and two weaknesses. The only way, guys, you can mess that is simply by not answering or putting that information in. Okay, it's just your personal feeling on it. Also, make sure you attach permission form, even if it's the same student you've been using. Just add the CBM probe and attach it. Okay. And then the last thing is take your data or your information, what you learned off that, and simply build a lesson off the skill that you were using the probe. If it was a reading fluency or math facts fluency, whatever it was, use the lesson plan template form and go in there and fill in the information and make sure you attach that. Okay. Again, the two new sections, probe and intervention, and the reflection section. Also, on test results and interpretation, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on a graph. I'm going to switch screens in a minute. Three terms. We're going to try to provide in the visual a baseline, intervention line if needed, and a name line. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example. Is there any questions on that before I switch over to the example report to show you what it looks like? A lot of those sections are the same. You've done it in the informal and the norm. We're just adding those two new little sections in that I just went over and pointed out to you, okay? Let me get over to the sample report so I can show you what the data plots look like when we add that visual in. It will be in your SPED 805 resources section. Here, I've already had it open. Then I'm going to scroll down to the sample reports. I've already done that. Already had it open. I'm going to scroll down to example of CBM report. I'm going to open it up. It's a PDF. Did it show up on your screen, Pam? Okay. Okay, here we have the abstract. Again, this is a sample that was submitted by a student in the previous semester. Here's our identifying information, just like you guys have been doing. Nothing new there, okay? It's the same. Probe and intervention. Here's our new section, the written expression probe. This student used a written expression probe. It's a short timed assessment that looks at a student's writing mechanics. They give a little brief description. They gave 6 probes. Again, we're asking you to do 4 to 6. Told they use 6 probes were administered every Tuesday. This was done over 6 weeks. Okay, this was done when this class was 18 weeks long. So this assignment, we took like 6 weeks and focused on it. Okay, now we're doing it in an 8-week period. So we're crunching it down into about 2 weeks of administering probes. Okay. So they go through and pretty much provide the information on the probe and talk about any intervention that was used. Here, this intervention is used. It talks about what they used. Next, we get into test results and interpretation. This is where I'm going to show you the new visual, the graph it's talking about. Okay, you're going to explain the data just like you've done. Here they're talking about the number of correct writing sequences. They listed their scores here. Here is their raw data, similar to the charts that you guys have been putting in. Here's the new chart. You can see that these are data points, the dots, okay? You can see, so they plotted them. You can see the dates, August 28th, August 29th, August 30th. They took those 3, averaged it out to come up with their baseline. For this class, it's 8 weeks now. We cut it way down. Baseline you could establish after you give your first probe. I'll tell you what your baseline is. Then they continued on. You can see they started off about 31, went up to about 42, and it dropped down to about 38. So we went up and then had a drop. And then they did an intervention. This is an intervention line right here. It's what we call the intervention line. You're showing me a break in probe administrations to implement some probes. So they implemented a probe between August the 30th and September the 4th. And then they came back in and gave the probe again. So you can see from August the 30th to the 4th, they had a slight increase. Okay, they waited a week, gave it again on the 11th, it went up. So you can see a gradual increase of scores. They started off at about a 31 and ended at like a 58. This is their aim line. It shows that upward trajectory. That's the aim line. Okay, they labeled it. Aim line here, they talk about in the report this intervention line. Now, Your student, their scores may start off here and they continually go up. You don't see a decline. If you don't see a drop, you don't need an intervention line, and you'll explain it up there. Due to student scores continually increasing, no intervention was needed. Now, Pam, let me ask you a question. On this example, let's say this particular student, I had another I had additional drops over here and I had to put interventions in. If I'm looking at this, if I come in and look at the chart, what do you think that tells me? Anybody want to take a guess at that? Kind of put you on the spot, Pam, but what do you think it would be if I was seeing multiple intervention lines over here and I wasn't seeing much of an increase or I was seeing stagnant scores? What do you think I probably need to consider doing?
Probably change your intervention.
Could be change your intervention, or if I have multiple intervention lines right here, that could possibly tell me that I need to drop the grade level content down a little bit. It's too difficult for him or her. Okay. So that kind of gives you a visual and you can look at it and see, oh my gosh. Or like Pam said, I might need to change up my intervention. What I was doing is not working. Okay. Everybody kind of see what I'm talking about now. It's you can go in and you put your data points in and connect them. Okay, you can do this using a Word has tools in it. PowerPoint has tools in it that you could use to do that. But this is what we're looking for right here, the aim line intervention. If you don't have any intervention, just simply talk about it up here. No intervention was needed. Anybody have any questions on that? So you can see they gave multiple data or had multiple data points. They had three over here, 2, 4, 6. They did 9 altogether. But remember, we were doing it over 6 weeks because it was an 18-week class at that time or 16-week. Okay, we go on to explain our data in the test results section. Again, you've been used to doing that. We're just adding this new visual right here. Okay. Recommendation and conclusion section. You guys are used to doing that already. We're going to use the data from the CBN to form that section. And then we have the new second section, the reflection. Okay, and you're just simply answering those things that I showed you on the syllabus. This student said, I learned that with an assessment so short and simple, we can still get a clear view of students' abilities. Okay, these probes are short. I mean, 1 minute, 2 minutes max. It's that quick. Biggest thing I learned is how to score a written expression based on number of correct writing sequences. Okay, and then they go on and talk about and answer the rest of the questions. The amount of time the students receives to write is 3 to 10 minutes. The writing probes took longer because they're having to actually write. Okay, and then they talk about would they use CBM again and why. Some students tell me I would not. It's too much time. I've got too many students. I don't have any help. It's just not feasible for me to do it with that many students. Some say absolutely I would do it again. It's an easy tool for me to graph the data and show parents and give them an idea how the student's doing. Okay. Then they had their permission form. Again, this is in the 805 resources section if you need an example. Now, I mentioned a while ago a resource, and I think I've already mentioned it in previous class. It's a free website, easycbm.com. You can go on there and it will give you probes for just about any subject area. You can click on the grade level, the subject area you want, and it will produce a probe for you. Okay. You do not have to submit a copy of that probe with your assignment. I don't need to see that. You're describing it to me. Okay. I only need to see your informal assessments. Okay. So let's look ahead. Let's forward think just a little bit. Unless anybody has any questions on the CBM before I kind of talk about the future 2 weeks here. So you'll have the rest of this week and then the following week to get your data points. So this CBM assessment is actually due ending the 7th week. So 1 week from this Sunday is when this CBM assessment report's due. Remember, It'll be due that Sunday. Then you have a short turnaround from Sunday until Wednesday afternoon at 4 to get the mock IEP in. Okay. Short turnaround. If you if you get this done, you get your data points in early, or you get them collected, and you want to do your CBM and submit it early, I'll be checking this every day. I will grade it, score it, get it back to you. If you know, hey, I've got a busy couple weeks coming up, I'm gonna try to get some of this done. If you do the CBM, submit it, I'll score it, get it back to you. And if you want to start on your mock IEP, okay? If you want to do that, I know you guys have a lot going on, but it's going to end quick on us. It's going to end in a hurry. I will spend next week, typically week 7 for this 805 course. Week 7 typically is our last Zoom because your final is due at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and we meet on Wednesdays. We have been, okay? So typically, week 7, Wednesday night is our last Zoom, unless I'm getting a lot of emails on with questions and I need to do a quick Zoom on a different night before that final to walk you through some things. Next Wednesday evening on Zoom, I will walk you through that mock IEP step by step and show you exactly what you'll need to do. I'll also give you a couple suggestions on platforms you could use to record it. Most of the time, I always recommend Zoom. Everybody's familiar with Zoom. You can record it doing Zoom. Okay. Also show you how to convert it into a YouTube video and just copy the link and drop it in and submit the link, and that's your final assignment submission. Okay. It condenses the file. You just copy the YouTube link that it creates and just paste it into Blackboard and submit it. I will walk you through that next Wednesday night. That's what we'll focus on. And I'll take any questions over the CBM. Remember, guys, we want to get 4 to 6 data points. That means you need to administer that CBM 4 to 6 times. Okay? Is there any questions on the CBM? I know I mentioned this last week about, hey, you might want to start thinking about what probe so you can kind of already have that ready to go and maybe go ahead and start administering that. So you essentially have, the rest of this week and all of next week to get it. So it'll be due not this Sunday night, but the following Sunday night. And then once you submit that following Wednesday at 4 o'clock is when your finals due, that video. You're almost there, guys. You
Um,
see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Go ahead, Season. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I use Easy CBM and that's what I was going to use was the math one like I kind of
Yeah,
did for that first paper as well.
yeah.
Do you want me to focus on just one section of the math CBM, like just the geometry, or do you
I
want me
would
to do
a
that whole
specific
thing?
skill. Yeah, one specific skill.
Okay, because I've been giving it to them, and then also on Easy CBM it goes different, like it's like 4.7 then 4.8.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to give them the exact same one each time because I
No,
think
you
it
don't.
would.
You want to tweak it just a little bit. So I would recommend on that probe each time you need to go in and tweak it just a little bit. You don't want to give the exact same one because they'll memorize that. Okay. So
Mhm.
I always say you could have the same content, but you want to shift maybe the answers around a little bit so they can't memorize that or juggle it up a little bit. But yeah, for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question, sir,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
may. So
Yeah.
I do first and second grade SPED. So I was thinking of doing like a fluency CBM.
Hmm.
That would be I can just do straight like addition fluency with my
Yep.
one kid, right? Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank
Exactly.
you.
Again, if you got, yeah, you're welcome, Jared. If you need, again, help in coming up with a probe, easycbm.com. Again, you can go to it, click on the grade level you work with and what skill or content area, and then the specific skill, and it creates it for you. Okay? It's a free tool, no charge using it. It's out there. It's a great resource. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is actually going to go for the mock IEP, but um, under the general intelligence section, so I have a 3-year eval coming up, and it's kind of who I'm basing off of my information so far. In the general intelligence section, usually our school psychologist covers that. So when we actually get to that point to do the mock IEP, is that a section that I would still talk about?
You can just talk about you talking about from the norm reference information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean you can include it and talk about it. Just make sure you have the information from the school psych. So again, you're basically in that mock IEP, just so you guys kind of know to ease your mind a little bit. You're basically you're presenting your data that you've collected from the informal, the normed, and the CBM to the team. Okay. We're going to
Okay.
pretend there's a team there. I know they're not there and you know they're not there, but you're going to acknowledge and introduce them at the beginning of that mock meeting as if they were there. Okay. You can do this, guys, from your kitchen table, in your home office, in your classroom. Um,
Okay. Um, so I have a question about following his IEP. So I guess I was confused. So like we wouldn't include anything like if they have OT, PT, or speech in there too?
you can mention that
Okay. Okay.
you might want to consider OT, PT, and speech services based on some of
Okay.
the results you've gotten. But again, most of the mock IEP for this class is really the purpose of it is for you to display that you understand the data and that you understand you can go in and explain it to the team after you've been collecting data.
Okay. So don't think
Okay.
of it as like a traditional IEP that we
No,
sat in. Okay. Okay. That's where I was confused at.
no,
Okay.
no. You literally, really, the whole goal of this is for you to show me that you understand the data you collected and that you can effectively relay that data and information to the team members in front of you and then make a recommendation and suggestion on whether to need to move forward for testing services. So basically, you're presenting all the data you've collected to determine whether we need to test this student or not.
Okay. Then I have another question. So like my classmates, I didn't use the same kid all the way through for
That's all
three
right.
assignments.
For the purpose of that meeting, we're going to go under the assumption that you use the same student in that meeting.
Okay.
So you're just going to use one student pseudonym, JT or Joe Blow or whatever you want to call the student, and you're just going to go under the assumption that you use the same case study student when
Okay,
you're
because I used
presenting the
yours.
information.
Okay,
Hmm?
because I used yours on the last one and I was confused on
That's
that.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Okay.
we're going to go under the assumption that it was your case study student.
Okay.
Even if you use my video, just rock along like it was your own case study student. For this, I'm focusing in on how confident are you presenting the information and making it understandable to the parent. That's what I'm looking at in the video. And I'm going to show you a way that'll help you follow kind of the guidelines that will help you in doing that when I go over the review next Wednesday. Okay, does that answer your questions, Bo and Jared?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome, Bo.
Yeah.
You
Thank
good?
you.
Okay, you bet. Again, I'm going to show you some techniques next week that'll greatly help you. Okay, that kind of guide you through this IEP or mock meeting. Basically, you're presenting your data is what you're doing. So, okay, you can just want to put your mind at ease on something. A lot of times when I start talking about this final assignment, a lot of times they'll overthink it at the beginning and they'll stress themselves out. Don't overthink it. It's pretty straightforward, and I'm going to show you kind of how to follow that guideline to make sure as you're doing your creating your video, and then I'm going to show you a way to display your data as well. Basically, you can share your data on the screen, do a screen share while you're doing your mock IEP meeting. So literally, Rebecca, it's just like me sharing a screen with you. You could have your data on the screen that you're sharing. You can create some slides to display your data charts and when you're explaining it. And then I'm seeing you in that little square in the corner. So basically you just do a screen share and it's showing you talking, presenting, and then you're showing your data and information too as well. So I'll go over all that next week and give you some pointers on it. It'll help you out, okay? Everybody good with that? If you run into any hurdles the rest of this week, before we meet on Wednesday next week, just email me with the probes, and just know next week, unless we have a lot of extra questions after that Zoom meeting next week, that'll be the last Zoom that we have, and most of that Zoom session I'll spend focusing on pointers and ideas and suggestions for you to get ready for the mock IEP, and then I'll take any questions you have on the CBM as well. All right. Everybody good? Okay. Everybody get signed in on the chat box. I can give you your points. Everybody good there? Yeah, looks like. Okay. You guys have a good rest of the week. Good weekend. Remember, nothing due this Sunday. The following Sunday it's due, okay? All right. Okay. You guys have a good rest of the week. Have a good evening. Thank you. Take care.
I
Thank
have a
you.
good night.
You too. Thank you.